Across human-robot interaction, there are a lot of domains in which we as roboticists try to either personalize robots' behavior to unique individuals or enable robots to refer to individuals through natural language. Meanwhile, there's been a lot of work in the computer vision community seeking to recognize social identity characteristics like race and gender. And I'm writing this paper because I'm worried about these research vectors intersecting. The argument I want to make in this work is that we as roboticists shouldn't be attempting to recognize, represent, or reason over interactant race. First, let's make sure we're crystal clear what we're talking about, because I don't think that this is something that people in the HRI community are thinking or writing precisely about. Race is a tool or technology for hierarchically organizing people in order to differentially assign value based off of which category they're assigned to. Race is a fundamentally American invention. The system of race we use today really grew out of the colonialist projects in the Americas. The set of categories used in a racialized society change over time, and how people are assigned to those categories change over time. Moreover, race isn't universal. Different countries use different racial paradigms. So that's all pretty fundamental. What does this mean for us as roboticists? In my paper, I discuss three main categories of concerns I have for roboticists. The first set of concerns I have are ontological concerns about the representation of race in robot cognitive systems. This would seem to require assigning racial labels to individuals based off of some particular set of racial categories. This isn't practical because it falsely presupposes that individuals innately belong to a particular race, and it presupposes that how individuals are racialized is spatiotemporally static. But moreover, this is really problematic because it can functionally be considered as the roboticist using race, the technology, through their robot. And it can serve as a vehicle for propagating and globalizing the particular set of racial categories used by the roboticist. For example, Morgan Cloud-Scheuermann from CU points out the Microsoft Celeb 1M dataset, in which Microsoft classifies faces as Caucasian, Mongoloid, or Negroid, which presupposes that people can and should be sorted into a universalizable set of racial categories, and that those are those categories. Moreover, using those categories or any categories on a robot would make these same terrible assumptions and yield race as a tool through the robot it's deployed on to continue to reinforce those racist logics. The second set of concerns I have are more specifically perceptual. Assigning racial labels to individuals requires attempting to perceive the race of a person, unless you ask people about their racial identity. Attempting to perceive race is a form of digital epidermalization, in which the technology itself races and racializes. This reifies and reinforces static notions of race as before. It imposes category without consent. It reinforces false notions of essential differences. It's likely to privilege whiteness and white maleness due to poor effectiveness of face detection algorithms for people of color. And fundamentally, it falsely presupposes that race is something that can be objectively observed, which it can't. Finally, if we enable robots to perceive and classify people in terms of race, this moreover would be used as a racial surveillance technology by the police in their continued efforts to oppress people of color. One counter argument to everything I've been saying today. You could argue that doesn't avoiding race altogether play into a colorblind ideology? Ignoring the social reality of race is itself a racist action. And recognizing race would enable robots to reaffirm users' racial identities, and it might allow us to better detect and call out instances of racism, like racist microaggressions. One great counterpoint to this, I think, comes from Cynthia Bennett's work on automated image captioning. They say that although blind users acknowledge that racial information could be really helpful in some circumstances, they prefer captioning systems to err on the side of less politicized descriptions of appearance, so they're not using political casts like race, especially when racial identity hasn't been provided by the person being described. If the same preferences apply to robots, it would suggest a user preference for colorblindness, especially in cases where the person themselves is not providing and requesting that you use this type of descriptor. So the main takeaways here are that the HRI community should be thinking more critically about race and avoiding essentialist, ahistorical, or spatiotemporally static notions of race. Roboticists should not be using robots to wield racist technology. There are critical ontological, perceptual, and deployment-oriented arguments against the representation, recognition, and reasoning by robots or by humans via robots of race. But this doesn't mean that roboticists should be colorblind. Robots can still be designed in positive, race-conscious ways that acknowledge the social reality of race while not perpetuating racist logics.